Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre regained a seat in the House of Commons this week. On Monday, he won a federal by-election in the Alberta riding of Battle River Crowfoot. And in his victory speech, he signaled a potential shift in strategy for the upcoming fall sitting.
We will work with anyone from any party. We continue to extend our hand to Mr. Carney and say that we want to work with any party to put an end to the tariffs and get a fair deal for Canada. In fact, we're proposing solutions, non-partisan solutions, that will help strengthen Canada's hand.
Well, today that collaborative tone shifted back, with Poilievre leveling some familiar jabs at the Prime Minister.
Mark Carney, while he made grand promises of change, he's even worse than Justin Trudeau. Where are Mark Carney's elbows these days? He seems to have misplaced them. The incompetence that you have to have as a Prime Minister to name such terrible ministers would be laughable if it weren't so terrifying. Carney is one walking, talking, broken promise.
What leader of the official opposition can we expect when MPs return to Parliament? Let's talk about that with the Power Panel. Stevie O'Brien is a former Chief of Staff to Liberal Cabinet Ministers. Sherelle Evelyn is the Managing Editor of the Hill Times. And Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties. Welcome all. Tim, I'm going to start with you.
I'm shocked by that, Karina.
Are you? Are you? I'm not. Was the talk of non-partisan willingness to extend a hand to the Prime Minister, Carney, was that post-victory glow on Monday night? Because today we're hearing a very different, or an old-style Poilievre when he talks about the walking, talking, broken promise. So what are we seeing? Who is he?
Well, he also made those comments, I think, on the general election night, that he'd work with the Prime Minister. Look, being the leader of the opposition is kind of managing Jekyll and Hyde all in one, all inside yourself. And I think Pierre Poilievre is going to have to figure out how that works, because there is part of the people who support Pierre Poilievre who do not want him to cease on the blunt instrument critique of the Liberal Party. There's a whole other part of both the Conservative Party and the country that like the election night message and like the by-election night message, which is, look, let's focus on the serious issues at hand. I think he's going to continue to try and find his feet on these things because he needs to. He needs to find his feet here. I think the risk for the Conservatives, Karina, is to fall back into the pattern they were in with Justin Trudeau. Just assuming that people would grow tired of the Liberals and of the person, and all of a sudden the opportunity would be theirs. We still seem to be in a moment whereby we are dealing with the President of the United States, who's unpredictable, who's wieldy, who Canadians have vested Mark Carney with the opportunity to deal with him. That doesn't mean he can't criticize Mark Carney. Doesn't mean he shouldn't criticize Mark Carney, but I think he's going to have to work on the tonality of that. Isn't that a great Ottawa word, the tonality?
Love it. Stevie, I wanted to ask, is it just that he can't help himself, or is this a strategy that we're seeing today?
I'm probably not the only Liberal whose stomach kind of lurched when we start hearing those sorts of slogans and attacks and repetitive, more of the same Poilievre. I think he can't help himself. I think it is not good strategy to go to what didn't work during the election to beat on the same horse. I think if there's ever a time to be collaborative and to work together in a bipartisan way, would be at the beginning of a mandate when there's a national crisis. He can build a lot of goodwill this way. I don't think the critiques of Carney ring as true as maybe the critiques of Trudeau did. And so I think he hurts his own credibility when he makes such, when his statements come down, they're not authentic.
Sherelle, what did you think when you saw his appearance today and his speech, and then how he answered questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everybody thought that, okay, that shift in tone that he'd been talking about, or we were wondering if it was going to be coming, it's not really there. Because yes, after the election in April, and after, just on Monday night, he was talking about being more collaborative. And even today as well, he was saying, to give him, some credit, he said again that we're not just going to be opposing. He said we're going to propose solutions, which is something that people have been asking for. They say we don't want to just hear negativity, we want to hear you come up with something. To say that it's nonpartisan solutions and things like that, I think that's going a step too far, because it is clearly just the things that the Conservative Party wants to see in terms of repealing certain natural resource regulations and laws having to do with getting oil across the country and out to market. And, all of these projects are going to fall into everybody's lap as soon as that happens, because if he was Prime Minister, as he said today, he'd be negotiating with the United States President from a position of strength, because he would have done all these things already. And, in 6 months, Carney has made things worse. I don't know if that's necessarily the message people want to hear, but it is also capitalizing on the fact that Carney has made some missteps. Looking at the Air Canada strike, people aren't necessarily, glowing when it comes to the Prime Minister and the Liberal government as a whole. So, of course, as any opposition politician is going to do, they're going to try to take advantage of that.
There's another, can I just say this, Maria?
Absolutely.
There's another aspect to this, right? It's the day after the by-election, which was in Alberta, a place in the heartland of Alberta that is strongly voted for Conservatives. There's part of the new constituency that he's representing that still wants to see a bit of the fire and the brimstone. If you remember the criticisms of Aaron O'Toole to a certain degree, and a lesser degree to Andrew Scheer, previous leaders of the Conservative Party, where they got a little too wishy-washy too quickly. So he's trying to balance that as well, again, to be fair to him. But I think if you're where I'm from in St. John's, or you're someone in Ontario and you're looking at this, you're like, it doesn't seem to add up. You say this and then you say that. And again, that is the challenge that he's got to navigate, keeping the people who elected him feeling like he's true to what he said he would be, while at the same time demonstrating that he can be a serious leader for serious times.
But Stevie, is Cheryl right? Is this actually sort of an opportunity, though, because Mark Carney has made big promises, because expectations are so high that if you chip away at whether you're meeting those expectations, that message might eventually resonate?
I think that Carney has only had sort of 4 months since the election to enact a pretty ambitious agenda. And I think, while maybe not perfect on all fronts, has made some significant moves. We've had multiple FMMs, First Minister meetings. He's engaged in Europe. He's looking for new allies. He's having to navigate Trump, that first White House meeting. He landed that well. So I think we need to give Prime Minister Carney more time to see the fruits of his vision. I don't think anybody could have fixed all of the problems that were, outlined during the election in 4 months, and I think most Canadians agree with that. They trusted Carney to navigate us through this sort of economic crisis. They put their trust in him, and they're going to give him a little bit of time to roll out his plan.
Cheryl, you mentioned the proposals that, really are proposals we've heard before from Poilievre. Is that going to be a challenge or a problem for the Conservatives if they say their new way of opposing is also proposing, if it's stuff that much of which was sort of rejected during the spring election, and likely also some measures that the Liberals will not take on? Is that a problem if they don't come up with new things?
I mean, I suppose so, but at the same time, one of the things that Pierre Poilievre has been really kind of strong and strident on is the fact that he keeps saying, we won the debate. The Canadians liked our message. Ultimately, they didn't vote for the party because they had another alternative in the Liberals and Mark Carney, who said, we are going to do some of these same things. We're packaging them differently with a different messenger that people seem to have much more affinity for. So it's not that that they should move off course of moving away from the core messages of, public safety, affordability, those types of things. People clearly care about them, but it's how they present them. So maybe it's coming through with different a different package, basically. Maybe it's putting different MPs to forefront them. Maybe that's the way to do it. But the fact that Pierre Poilievre has been out of the House, he's not going to be ceding that airtime anymore. So it will have to be, if they are going to keep the same message, they're going to have to tweak it.
Well, today he was out on crime, bail reform, and public safety. Tim, is that still a good wedge issue for them? Or because we've had now some bail reform, we have promises of new bail reform from Mark Carney, and they do seem to be on the same page on some of this. Is that still a useful wedge message?
Yeah, I think it is, because people in most places are not feeling as safe as they once did. So if Pierre Poilievre's strength when he was against Mr. Trudeau was he seemed to be able to connect with people on issues of affordability before the then Prime Minister could. And I think he can still do that on the issues of public safety. So people would be surprised if he wasn't talking about that. I would say the other thing, Karina, to be mindful of, part of proposing doesn't mean you're always proposing ideas that are going to fit perfectly. Part of what you're trying to do, you're the government in waiting, you're not the government. You at least need to demonstrate you have some ideas. People would expect them to have some degree of difference, I suspect. They can't be so rigid that they could never be seen to be accepted, but I don't think Pierre Poilievre is in that place. So I wouldn't expect his proposing means to be, here, Prime Minister, take this and do it. And when he has put ideas out there that Carney's like, he has taken them. For example, the carbon price, ending the carbon price, ending carbon taxation. So the good ones just get outright stolen. So that, maybe there's a whole law and order agenda there, Karina.
And then the credit seemed to, at least for that one, many Canadians are thanking Mark Carney for that and seem to forget where it originated. But Stevie, in terms of proposing new ideas, Poilievre was asked today about the contract dispute with Air Canada. We know that the Conservatives had this legislation they had been pushing again recently that would have, they say, taken care of unpaid work. But it's also come up, and I'm wondering if this could be a new idea from the Conservatives, even though they've not done it in the past when they were in government, is airline competition and allowing more foreign competition in to help make it so that Air Canada doesn't have such an impact if they are to have strikes and the like. Is that something that could be an idea that gets stolen then from the Liberals?
I agree with Tim that Carney is an efficient pragmatist. He will see a good idea, and if it's sort of ideologically still consistent with a Liberal platform, he will take it and he'll run with it. If it's good for the country, I think he will adopt measures. He's trying to deliver, and I think he has a vision. So maybe it's those reforms. I think he's focused on the Canadian domestic economy, and so if the calculation of a greater competition would enhance Canadian industry or protect Canadians in any way, I think he'd need to see some hard statistics on that. But if it could advance, then I'm sure he and Jolie would be behind it.
I did want to ask you, you mentioned how there was this choose your own adventure moment today in the news conference where a reporter asked whether if the choice had been different, what he would have been like and what the country would have been like if he was Prime Minister. And he said, as you mentioned, he'd be building pipelines, expanding ports, getting concessions from President Trump. Do you think that message, Sherelle, will resonate with Canadians?
I don't know. When you're dealing with the U.S. president, it's hard to say anything definitive. I think it's probably foolish to say anything definitive simply because he changes on a dime. Poilievre today was saying that Mark Carney has basically gotten a worse deal. We're worse off with the president than we were before he came into office. I don't know if anybody else would be in a better position simply by virtue of dealing with Donald Trump. It is, of course, as an opposition leader, something that you were, of course, going to, stand on and say, yes, I am absolutely would have been better. But I think that's part of the reason why he didn't form government is because the Canadian public didn't believe it at the time.
What do you think, Tim?
Well, he's not going to bring out the pom-poms and say, yeah, you're doing great, Mark Carney, you're the man, woo, high five. Donald Trump may do that separately with his friends. I think you're going to see Pierre Poilievre, find ways to offer critique even when he's trying to lend support. But I go back to his audience right now. Look, what are we, August 20th today? Other than the wonderful viewership of this show, there aren't a hell of a lot of people that are still paying attention to politics. So he can test drive messages as well at this moment to see where they resonate. The more particular audience that's important for him is still his own party membership who just saw him get reelected, so they want to know he's true to them first, because all us Ottawa elites are saying you got to change your message, and that's wrong.
We only have a couple minutes left. Stevie, in terms of that message and whether it resonates, is it conceivable that Canadians, since the Conservatives want to broaden even the 8 extra million votes they got this election, I was talking with Melissa Lansman yesterday, and she was saying, we need to actually even broaden that base further, especially if they want to form government. So is a message like that going to help them towards that, if he's talking about how he would have done better with Trump if he was Prime Minister?
I think the likely sequence of competitions that Poilievre is going to have to win coming up starts with a leadership review. And his tonality, the messaging, I think it's really to that outcome that he is focused on. He needs to remain in leader in order to have the opportunity to expand the base in the next general. I think this is somewhat of a perennial problem with Conservatives, is that to win leadership or maintain leadership, you have to have a certain level of, you have to have certain messaging, you have to land certain points as to the base. The Liberals listen to that and then can pull that and use it against them in the general. So I think he's, navigating that right now, and we'll probably, unfortunately, hear more of the same slogan-based, answers that we did in 2024.
Yeah, it's a hard line to walk for most Conservative leaders. That's certainly done some of them in because of that difficulty. Thank you for coming and for giving me your perspectives. The Power Panel, Stevie O'Brien, Tim Powers, and Sherelle Evelyn.